Hey, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Friends Friday here with PlexTrac. We're excited to have you joining us here on a Friday. Hope you guys are getting ready for a fun weekend, but thankful that you could spend a few minutes here with us. We're really excited about today's episode and our special guest, James Carter. I'll let him introduce himself here in a second, but he and I have been friends for a long time. Used to work together, and he's currently an advisor for PlexTrac. So it's been a great, just a great professional and personal relationship. But we're talking today a little bit about kind of the impact that venture capital and private equity has had on the security space, as well as just the state of the security industry at large. And so excited about the discussion today. James, please introduce yourself because you've got a story career so far. So.
Well, thanks, Dan. Thanks. I think we're coming up on probably around 15 years or so knowing each other in the space and working together and things like that. And obviously, even when I wasn't an official advisor for PlexTrac, we'd still meet up at all the conferences and reunions and things like that. And so it's been really awesome. James Carter. I'm my operating roles. I'm a Chief Information Security Officer. I'm now also the Chief Information Officer for a company called Eptura that does workforce management, work tech management, asset management, software company. It's a part of a broader private equity portfolio owned by Thoma Bravo. And then I have another role where I'm the operating advisor for Thoma Bravo, which means I work with other portfolio companies to help them and guide them and mature their security programs to make sure that Thoma Bravo can protect their investments there. And then I do strategic advising for a few different startups. And so connected on the VC side, the private equity side, definitely two different worlds. But looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah. So I think I kind of wanted to start with, like, in general, we've both kind of been in the space for a while and kind of seen it evolve. And what would be your take on kind of where the industry sits today from, like, hey, are we staying ahead of threats? How are security professionals getting their jobs done today? What influences have really impacted those for better or worse? I know that's a big topic, but would just kind of be curious, like your 2 cents on kind of the state of the state, so to speak.
Yeah, it's been an interesting, I think, with the economy, whenever it started to sort of decline a little bit in some aspects and the investments sort of slowed down, we've seen a change in the market. There's a lot of consolidation happening right now in security and tech companies. We just saw, my former employer is a SIM company, just acquired a company called Exabeam. They've merged together now. Cisco bought a product recently. And so you see all these sort of consolidation happening right now in our industry. But I think overall, I don't think we'll ever stay ahead of the attackers, to answer the first part of your question. Yeah. I think we're always going to be a step behind. I do think that if companies can focus on putting in a lot of the basic infrastructure needed and things like that, that they can at least keep on level and not be just such an easy target for it. And then I think, there's some promise on the AI side as it relates to, leveraging, we always talked about in the past about security having a shortage of resources, and maybe we can leverage AI to help us fight those battles and kind of like multiply the size of our army, if you will, against the attackers. And so I think there's good promise there. I haven't seen a whole lot of security-focused AI-driven pieces come out, other than existing security companies trying to embed some form of AI into their products. Mm-hmm. But I do think there's some promise there. And I had this concept years ago of, like, saying before, AI became the latest hot thing, of like, hey, in the security operations world, we should try to create these like virtual security analysts, virtual security engineers, have a lot of suggestive communication as far as like, hey, we identify this thing, here's some things we suggest, all these different pieces. And then it's kind of cool to see the AI market kick up and kind of put that into more of a reality than just a proof of concept or a concept that I had, a number of years ago. So it's, I think there's a lot of promise there.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that, the industry has evolved so much and grown so much and gotten so much more awareness from like those early days when you're just trying to kind of convince people that they should be investing in security, or the bad thing might happen, and then the bad thing happens, and so now we're in the state of like, here's how you actually go solve the problems, right? Which is I think the harder problem, not just being able to tout the evangelistic aspects of like, hey, something bad could happen, but we're past those days, I think, for the most part. But I'd be curious to, one, you mentioned a couple of things. You said, like definitely different worlds between VC and private equity. I think people would love to kind of understand that, what that means. And then two, like what impact, good and bad, do you think that both of those, the investment vehicles have had on the security space specifically?
Yeah, that's a big question. It's a good question. I think that market dynamics probably affects both VC and private equity. When I look at, obviously on the VC side, tends to invest primarily in earlier stage, looking for really big multiples on the return. So looking for high growth, high velocity, software companies that they can get 30x return on. And I think usually dollar amounts are a little smaller as it relates to that. And then they look at sort of the more innovative frontline cutting edge tech that they can get in front of to help drive sort of future earnings down the road. And then I look at private equity. Private equity tends to take a lot of established organizations that may need a transformation, or they'll have product plays that need to move to platform plays, and they'll do this. They figure if they can streamline the operation, improve the efficiency, and then also go through this tech transformation, not only will they hit growth, but they're focused heavily on EBITDA, which is more around your profitability. And after all things considered, what percentage of your business is profitable and how many millions of dollars that is. And then when you look at market evaluations from those, you've got sorry, I've got a baby.
Oh, you're good.
I'm crying.
Friday.
When you look at the market evaluations of it, private equity backed companies tend to sort of, they don't hit some of the bigger multiples that some of the other ones, because it depends on the market, whether it's focused on growth or growth focused on profitability. And so private equity tries to ride the medium in between that, where I think the VC focuses heavily on the growth side of it, because that's where you get the biggest multiples. And so I think that's at play. I think they all have funds. They all fund things a little bit differently. Private equity funds a lot on debt versus just capital that they've got in their fund, or VCs mostly capital, and so like mostly investors into their fund. And so I think those are some of the just difference in how they invest into some of these software companies and what stages.
Yeah. So I mean, and I think that's good. I think it's important because like there's a lot of folks that may be even thinking about starting their own company in the security space or whatnot. But also I think that for just like a standard security professional or like security team that may not really like be as exposed to that world, but they're getting inundated with marketing and everything around these products, right, that have been invested in. So like there's the capital that they're using to use for go-to-market strategies. And so I think it's important for like practitioners to understand what is at play there, because like I think Haroon Mir had a good article, this was probably a few years ago now, where it's like, hey, just because like you see the banners at RSA and the booths of these companies doesn't necessarily mean that they're offering something that's worthwhile to the industry, right? I mean, it is a bet on some of these things, and so I think using that lens is probably important for practitioners. But also I think what's been good is that it really has propelled, in my opinion, a lot of the security space forward. Much fast as like you said, we'll never keep up with the attackers, but I do think that there's been some like getting awareness and investment into the industry has really helped accelerate some of the things that really needed to be there, and hopefully will continue like in the AI space. But I'd be curious, like from a practitioner perspective, what should be some of the things they should look at, versus just, oh well, they have investment, so they must be like a good company, right?
Yeah, I like the joke that some quote unquote security companies are actually just really good marketing companies.
Right.
And when you look at trying to get as much growth as possible, a lot of times they spend heavily on the marketing side, the sales side, maybe less on some of the other areas. But that's what's caused an issue in our industry, I think, around having so much snake oil being out there, talked about. Everything's got the new latest things, and half the time when you go around at all the booths at RSA, the new latest thing is something that everybody's talking about the exact same way. And so you're just like,
Right.
okay, how do I separate these 50 product companies that tell me they're going to solve all my problems and world hunger and all these other things, all of them the exact same way? Who can actually deliver on that or not? And I think being able to just understand that if the promise seems a little too much, it probably is a little too much.
Mhm.
And to look at, really just look at very specific things around, like I always tell people when they build out a program, like look at you're not going to build a security program the exact same way at every single company and cookie cutter. You might to some degree, but ideally you're looking at sort of the business that you're in, the problem set of that business, who the threat actors are, what they're maybe targeting, looking at sort of the profile of it, and then looking at what's important, most important for that business, and then tailoring your program around that, and then tailoring the tooling around enabling that program.
Yeah.
Versus the old adage of like you always build the process before you buy the tool kind of thing. Like this is very similar. You have to understand what you're trying to protect in your program itself, what the challenges are, and then build the tools around it to be able to help enable that. And I think if you look at those specific things, you'll be able to draw up use cases and things that you are really focused on, and then you can try that out with all these vendors and see like, all right, show me that you can do these things, and then that's how you'll get some validity. They may not be able to do everything, but maybe they're doing what what you need done really well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what you have to look for, but that takes effort and research and work, and sometimes as we may talk about later, where we have all these added responsibilities. Sometimes we don't have time to do all that extra legwork, but the market kind of demands us to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to make bad decisions in protecting our organization and then pay the price for it later.
Well, exactly. It's like, I mean, I think, we were going to kind of like discuss, like, does this play a factor in how some of the teams, get burnt out, right? I mean, I think burnout is definitely a very real topic in security, but like, I mean, I agree in that, like, trying to come to from the perspective of like, what problem are we really trying to solve? Like, what do we actually need to go do now? And then exploring like how you're going to do that, either partnering with a vendor, or your approach to that solution. But with so much that you get inundated with, and with so many opportunities to try and have um, like management of like all the different products that you might have in a security team, do you think that leads to burnout, or is it more just related to the fact that like you never feel like you're ever going to catch up to the
I'm
attack?
sure. I'm sure it's a combination of it all. It's
Yeah.
when you're, especially if you're a decision maker from a buying decision, you're a CISO or whatever it is. Your reputation is going to be hung on the hats of what technologies you've brought in, and people may realize like, oh, he was a great leader, he did these different things, but you don't want to be the guy like, boy, he made some really bad decisions on these things right here, and then we had it took forever to get out of this contract, and it was painful, and all these different things. And so when I look at just that perspective, like the buying decision on what vendors you partner with, and I think partner is the key word
Yeah.
versus just what you buy, is such an important piece, because their job is to make you successful, and for you to be successful, they have to be able to do their job really well
Yeah.
and meet the intent. I think that's one aspect. I think the other aspect, and this kind of feeds into some of the burnout pieces, is that like a lot of companies have a lot of money to buy tools, and they'll buy a ton of tools without evaluating or thinking through the total cost of ownership of those tools, how to manage them, what people and resources you need, how much process, how much friction is it going to introduce into your overall business. And they don't think about some of that stuff. And by the way, adding friction is also a cost.
Right.
And if you're slowing the business down even by a minute, like you can try to extrapolate the cost of what every minute or every hour of production looks like in your business, but there's a cost associated with that. There's a cost to have certain staff around it, et cetera. And so I think companies tend to have tons of money for tools, and they have less money for resources, and I think for people. And I think the people side is an important piece, because I think they want to be able to keep that as slim as they can, so that way they don't have to go through any kind of employment actions or anything later on if they grow or reduce sizes as a company, where software is a little bit easier to manage through that. And I think because of that, to keep the staffs fairly small still, and therefore, but they've been adding more and more responsibilities. And so I think that is the part that leads to burnout, and then you combine that with like maybe they've got an army of tools and don't know how to use them, or the cost of tying those tools together to be effective as a whole. There's a whole bunch of costs associated with that, and that also weighs heavily on the practitioners out there trying to do good things for their company. And so, I just look at my own situation now. I have CIO responsibilities as well, and so that was something newly added. And I think we're seeing that more and more. I have a good friend of mine, Ryan Kazantsian. I'll drop his name. I'm sure he'll be fine with it. He was the CISO at Wiz. Him and I worked together at Mandiant for a number of years. He also now has CIO responsibilities at Wiz, and so that was a new thing that's added. There's been so many cases of it, so I feel like too that not only is the responsibilities shifted a little bit, we get adding more and more, but also they're starting to create this joint role more and more often seen in a lot of the businesses today. But I think a lot of that is like they're just trying to consolidate their tech and their digital footprints into one leader. And the security leaders, I hope, the reason why we're seeing this change is that they've done a good job of being able to get into that and sort of maturing and modernizing everything, that they figure, hey, these security, you got to cut across everything. So you got to know a little bit of everything at least. And that maybe lends well to you understanding some of the CIO type roles and responsibilities as well, and having that as an add-on. So I think all of that leads to stress and burnout, but it's all things better.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you mentioned something that I wanted to kind of tap into a little bit, is like what type of partner truly what type of partner you want to be, because like that's been another kind of like, I would say, point of contention, right, with like CISOs or security directors or whatnot. Obviously they're getting inundated with anybody and everybody that wants to sell them their product, and so they may kind of have a standoffish approach to the vendors, or like treat vendors in a different capacity. And my opinion is like you really want to like take a step back, what problem you're trying to solve, and then actually truly partner with the solutions that you want to help build. Or, I mean, like the vendors that you would truly want to partner with, because like one, you can influence their roadmap for sure, right? And especially depending on what stage, if you feel like I think we've experienced, you've got companies that's like, hey, we just want to buy the product and just use the functionality, and not wait for things. Like we want it to do everything we need it to do right now, versus hey, this is our trajectory as a security program. Here's where we want to be in 3 years. We see that you can help us get there. We're going to need some more things, right? But like we're going to work together with you, because it's going to still save us time, as opposed to building this ourselves or hiring another solution, hiring somebody else. Or we've looked into these other products that may be more supposedly mature, but can't do that and can't move quickly enough. I think it's interesting, kind of the relationship you have with your vendors and investments from that perspective.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think from a partnership perspective, just like with my friends network, I have very close friends that are my kind of inner circle, and it's usually a smaller list. And then I have people that I'm friends with that kind of sit outside that inner circle, and then I have sort of just people that I know just generally in the space. And so like I think I look at vendors in the same way of like there may be some key vendors or some key solutions or technologies that either they've proven over time they can deliver for what I need, or whatever the case is, and they can make their way into the inner circle. But that's a selective group, and I think that's the thing. Like you can't be partners, quote unquote, partners with everybody. Otherwise, you're partners with nobody. And I think that's a key piece. And I think another thing you hit on is the word solution. Is that we need solutions to larger problems versus like maybe a point products or things like that. We may need a bigger thing, total package, versus just buying technology. We may need services. We need it to be successful. We may need a lot of other things. We may need to tailor certain things to fit our needs. And we need to have the delivery get proved out. Like we need to make sure that the vendor can deliver on this. And like that's where the rubber meets the road, is like if you're a CISO and you can buy these tools and solutions and have these great plans, but if you can't actually deliver and execute, which is going to require outside help and partners, then you're going to have I love the the thumbs up thing there. But if you don't have all that, then it becomes a challenge. So you got to keep that trusted list pretty close. and then make sure that your partners can provide you more of a total solution versus just trying to sell you software.
Right. Yeah. And I think that one I would hope also helps with the burnout conversation, because like your engineers and your practitioners, they're actually seeing how you're working together to actually solve a problem, rather than like, I now have this new tool that's now thrust onto me, or I've got to get this to work and I don't have somebody to help me. It's just an added responsibility. Even like the support and maintenance of it, just keeping it up may be half a person's job, but if you actually are working with a team to say like, hey, no, but here's the solution and here's the problem, so you actually have demonstrable results. I think that hopefully that would help,
Yeah,
right?
and I think just to add on to that, there's a couple points. Like one of them is if you're adding more work to someone or some group that already has more work than they can handle, you are part of the problem and not part of the solution.
Yeah.
And so if bringing in your tooling and technology adds more for them to do, adds more for them to investigate, adds just adds additional friction into what they're doing, you're not sort of creating the solution they need. Because like every CISO and joint roles or whatever is looking for, how can I make security easier and how can I manage it better? And if we're changing that conversation from making it easier to, oh, our solution actually requires a bunch of overhead, which is going to make it harder and more work for you, it's going to go in the exact opposite direction. And then I
Yeah.
think from a vendor relationship perspective, this is like a piece of advice I would give to any seller out there selling security products or almost any software. If you can't show and demonstrate your value as a partner before the sale, even, then you're doing something wrong. Like you should be giving them something of value to demonstrate how it would be like working for you or working with you, and if they buy something or not. And I
Yeah.
think that's and from a vendor perspective, like you can do that. You can, if you get the sale, and then post sales is what better position to be in than one where you're helping the customer like drive some of their roadmap and what their future looks like, and that is partnership, and that is also being into that trusted inner circle when you're helping drive the roadmap and drive their progress to make them a better and more secure organization that's less risky.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, yeah, I mean, I think that's great advice. And I think that's probably advice I would also give to like investors, right? Like in the VC and PE realm, because I think, like when there's lots and lots of capital in the market, a lot of products get invested in that maybe haven't actually like shown that they can provide value to the market, right?
Yeah.
So, that would just be kind of like probably what I would suggest. Having both sat on both sides of this fence. We're a VC backed company, right? Obviously, like we have great partners with our investors, but and so that's not like an indictment. It's just more like, hey, like these are the things that if I wouldn't buy this as a practitioner, why would I invest in it as a
Yeah.
from the capital perspective?
I think it's interesting. A joint friend of ours, obviously, this is who I heard it from. I'm not going to mention their name, but they during when money was free and VCs were just heavily investing, they would invest in the idea
Yeah.
versus the actual like what the idea looks like in production in steady state. Are you making any market? Are you proving out your concept in a way that shows that your business is going to be on the up and up and make it? Because we know that a lot of startups and a lot of early stage companies don't end up making it. But I think he told me one time, he said, look, he's like, honestly, we came to the investors with things already working, and he goes, sometimes I wonder if we'd have been better off if we just came with an idea and then have them invest in the idea, and then we can start doing it. We could have got an earlier start to what we were doing. But I think if you look at VCs now today, they are definitely more cost conscious now, and they're looking at, do you have a proven, even if you're early stage, which people are like, why are they looking at this in early stage? But you have to almost have a proven track record, like at least a year or whatever the case is, some kind of proven track record to demonstrate that you're going to be successful and that you're gaining market share and growing and doing these different things before they'll even invest. And I think that's sort of 3 years ago they didn't invest in the idea. Now they need you to show like a year of like growth and consistency and proving out and having all the proof points to be able to say like, no, your investment is safe with us. We'll be successful. Here are the proof points around it, which wasn't the way 3 or 4 years ago even.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, fascinating stuff. Well, I mean, like always tends to happen. These sessions fly by, and it's always fun conversation. So, like, if you were to kind of like sum up, or like give our listeners a couple key takeaways, what would be some advice? I mean, we've had a lot of good nuggets here, so just to kind of wrap it up, how'd you land the plane on this conversation?
Yeah, we went all over the board. We went
Yeah.
investments, financing. We went into being a practitioner on the inside. I think from a practitioner perspective, I think just marry the business to your program, and I think understand your business, understand the ins and outs of it. If you're not, some of us may be at a CISO level, some of us may be on the exec team, some of us may be a step below it, but like understand the full like end-to-end spectrum of how your business makes money, and then tailor your program around it versus trying to think that you come in knowing what the solution is and you're going to deliver on that. And so, be inquisitive, know that there's still things for us to learn and we can't wash versus repeat. So I think that's one. The other part, CISOs are business leaders now. Even now that I have a joint role, I'm still a business leader. And that's my number one priority above security and above IT and above whatever. So I think those are some of the things. And then from an investment perspective, I think, the market's a little tougher right now, but if you've got a great idea, you should still push it forward because there's a ton of new opportunity, especially on the AI side and things like that, that you can actually, get an early, be an early on the upward swing of something that could end up being great. And don't be afraid to do that. Just know that your pitch, how you go to market, everything better be airtight for those investments to come in nowadays. And so I think that's what I would give on that side as well for all the, CEOs or start people thinking about doing startups, et cetera, is to push forward, but understand you got to have your ducks in a row a little bit more than you did 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think trusting your gut on like, hey, solid business principles will still win, and they'll still win investment, right? It's like that's what people will, so focusing on like, hey, how do we get customers? What are they willing to pay for it? How do we get in front of them? Is the market big enough? Those are all the key questions, and if you can answer those and have some data to back it up, like I said, it might take a little more legwork now than it did a few years ago, but you come out of it with more validation, and that gives you even more runway without capital, right? So
and I think it sounds cliche, but if you're passionate about something, you should just do it.
Yeah.
And I think, because if there are things, if you're doing stuff that you don't like, it's because you're not passionate about that thing that you don't like. And so no matter how much self-help or whatever you're going to read or whatever anything like that, coaching, you're only going to make that thing so far, right? But you're not, it's going to be a forced action versus something you're passionate about. So if you're passionate about something, just know that carries as much weight as anything else, because then all the other pieces will fall in line versus something that you're kind of like half passionate about, maybe you're not. You're not going to do the necessary work to be successful. So I think that's the last piece I'll have.
Yeah, no, good stuff. Well, James, thanks again. I loved having you on. I'm sure we'll have you back. But yeah, we're flashing up like how people can reach you or like follow you, and anything else you want to just draw attention to in terms of things you're working on or anything like that. So.
No, yeah, thanks, Dan, and I appreciate you all having me on. Long time, I guess, friend and watcher, but or listener, and first time participating in it. But thanks for having me on. And then obviously you see the link here for LinkedIn, and then my LLC is called Cardient Security, and it's kind of a play on my old probably my Mandiant life back in the day. But feel free to look me up either way, and happy to help any way I can.
Awesome. Well, thanks a bunch, James. Again, really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy, and so thanks for joining us. Fascinating conversation. I'm sure we'll get some comments. So, feel free to, if you have questions, or feel free to leave comments in the threads, and we'll try to get back to as many as we can. But other than that, thanks everybody, and enjoy the rest of your Friday.